January 14th, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. A man named Dave Rempel stands in his kitchen staring at a heating bill that reads $340, 1 month, 1 house. His teeth are chattering despite the thermostat set to 68. The floors are cold enough to feel through 2 pairs of socks. He has already turned the dial up twice this week. He already called the HVAC company once this season. He already replaced the furnace filter, bled the radiators, and checked the ductwork for obvious gaps. He spent an entire Saturday afternoon on his hands and knees with a flashlight, looking for something, anything, that might explain why the house refused to hold heat. Nothing changed. The bill kept climbing. What nobody knew at the time was that 200 yards down the road, an Amish farmhouse was sitting at a comfortable 72 degrees, with 0 furnace running and $0 spent on gas that month. The floors in that farmhouse are warm underfoot. Not just tolerable, warm. The windows are clear of frost on the inside. The family inside is not wealthy. They are not using technology you cannot access. They are not burning a different fuel or running a different system. The difference is not money. It is knowledge. 200 years of it, passed down through apprenticeship, never written in any manual sold at a hardware store, never packaged into a certification course, never turned into a product with a margin attached. That knowledge can cut your heating bill by $2,400 a year. Documented results, real homes, real winters, and the core fix costs $5. Most homeowners blame the furnace when the house gets cold. They call the HVAC technician. They buy a newer thermostat. They turn the dial up and watch the bill climb higher. But the furnace is almost never the real problem. The building envelope is. Think of your home as a bucket. The furnace fills it with heat. But if the bucket has holes, it does not matter how fast you fill it. The heat pours right back out. And most homes built in the last 50 years are full of holes that no one ever bothered to close because closing them was not part of the construction contract and was not visible to the buyer at closing. Here is where the heat actually goes. Floors account for 15 to 20% of total heat loss in a typical home. Windows account for 25 to 30%. Doors and gaps in the framing take another 15. Walls and attic handle the rest. That means the floor beneath your feet and the glass in your windows are responsible for nearly half of everything your furnace produces. Half, gone, every night, every winter, for the entire life of the house. Cold floors make the problem worse in a way most people never connect. When your floor sits at 55 degrees, the air near the ground chills fast. That cold air sinks, warm air rises. Your thermostat, mounted 4 feet up on the wall, reads 68 and shuts the furnace off. But your feet are sitting in 55-degree air. The room feels 8 to 10 degrees colder than the thermostat claims, so you turn the dial up, the bill goes up, the floor stays cold. The cycle repeats every single winter, and most homeowners never trace it back to the floor because the floor feels like it is supposed to feel that way. It is not. Windows are the other thief. Standard single-pane glass and even older double-pane glass act like radiators running in reverse. All night long, they pull warmth out of the room and radiate it into the cold outside air. You can feel it if you stand near a window on a January night. That faint, invisible pull against your skin, that subtle chill that has nothing to do with a draft, that is radiant heat loss. It is silent, it is constant, and it is costing you hundreds of dollars a season. The modern insulation industry has an answer for all of this. Spray foam, rigid foam board, blown-in cellulose, thermal curtains with price tags that make your eyes water. The solutions work, but the price tags are brutal. A professional floor insulation job runs anywhere from $3 to $8 per square foot. A full window replacement costs $800 to $1,200 per window. For a standard 3-bedroom house, you are looking at tens of thousands of dollars to fix what the Amish fixed for almost nothing. Because the Amish solved this problem in the 1800s, with straw, and the fix still works today. But this story does not start with the $5 floor fix. It starts with a philosophy of building that treats warmth as a problem of physics, not a problem of spending. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, 1800s. Amish communities are spreading across the region, building farmhouses that will stand for 150 years and stay warm through winters that regularly drop below zero. They have no central HVAC, no electric heat, no gas lines running under the floor. What they have is an understanding of how heat moves, how cold enters, and how a building can be made to hold warmth the way a cast iron pan holds heat long after the fire goes out. You set that pan on a cold counter and it stays warm for 20 minutes. A well-built Amish farmhouse does the same thing across an entire winter night. The philosophy has 4 pillars. Dense insulation packed into every cavity without exception. Thermal mass built into the floors and walls so the structure itself absorbs and releases heat slowly. Elimination of every draft at every seam, every joint, every threshold. And radiant barriers that slow the transfer of heat through glass and wood. These are not complicated concepts. They are ancient ones, and the Amish did not invent them. They inherited them from centuries of European building tradition and refused to abandon them when modern construction decided that cheap and fast was good enough. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. The specific technique that has captured the attention of millions of people in the last 2 years is not spray foam. It is not rigid board. It is compressed straw packed into floor joists. Straw has been used as insulation since before recorded history. Ancient builders in Egypt packed it into mud brick walls. Medieval European craftsmen stuffed it into wall cavities and tamped it down with wooden mallets until the pack was dense enough to resist a thumb pressed hard against it. The thermal properties are not a secret. Straw delivers an R value of 1.5 to 2.0 per inch of compression. Pack it tight enough into a floor joist cavity, and you are looking at R values that compete directly with modern fiberglass bats at a fraction of the cost. Amish builders in Lancaster County have been using compressed rice straw specifically because of its density and its resistance to moisture absorption. The technique is passed down through apprenticeship. A young builder learns it by working alongside an older one, watching the hands, feeling how tight the pack needs to be, learning by touch what no specification sheet can describe. The older builder does not explain the physics. He does not use the word conduction or thermal bridging. He presses the straw into the joist bay with both forearms and says tighter, and the apprentice presses harder, and eventually the apprentice understands through his own hands what the words could never fully communicate. There is no manual, there is no certification course, there is no YouTube tutorial produced by a company trying to sell you something. The knowledge lives in the hands and the memory of the community, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, because knowledge that lives only in memory can disappear, communities scatter, apprentices move away, and 200 years of thermal engineering wisdom can vanish in a single generation if nobody writes it down. The fact that it did not disappear is largely due to a channel called Zero Bill Living. In 2024, a small YouTube channel began documenting Amish building techniques in detail, filming the floor insulation process step by step, explaining the physics in plain language, and publishing it for free. The videos reached millions of viewers. Homeowners in Minnesota, in Michigan, in upstate New York watched the footage and started pulling up their floor panels with bags of straw from the feed store. The results were documented in comment sections, in follow-up videos, in forum threads that ran for hundreds of replies. Heating bills dropped, floors warmed. The 8 to 10 degree temperature gap between thermostat and floor began to close. The cold floor was a warning sign. Most homeowners ignored it for decades, assuming it was just how old houses felt in winter. They were wrong. The cold floor was not a symptom of an aging furnace or thin walls. It was a symptom of an empty cavity, a joist bay with nothing in it, open to the cold air beneath the house, conducting that cold directly up through the subfloor and into the living space every single night. You could have diagnosed it with a $20 infrared thermometer, point it at the floor, point it at the wall, read the numbers. The floor would come back 8 degrees colder, every time, in almost every house built after 1970. The Amish never left that cavity empty. Not once. Not in 200 years of building. Up to this point, modern construction had been winning on speed and cost. That was about to flip. The heist. It is January. The crawl space is dark, cold, and about 18 inches tall. You are lying on your back on a piece of cardboard, headlamp on, looking up at floor joists that stretch away into the dark like the ribs of something enormous. The air smells like soil and old wood and something faintly mineral, the way stone smells when it has been cold for a long time. Your breath fogs in the beam of the headlamp. Your jacket is already picking up grit from the cardboard. And right now, that empty cavity between those joists is costing the average homeowner somewhere between $4 and $6 every single night, just sitting there, empty, losing money in the dark. The fix costs $5 total. Here is how it works. You source compressed rice straw bales, not hay, not loose straw from a feed store. Compressed rice straw bales, the kind sold at farm supply stores and rural co-ops for $3 to $5 apiece. One bale covers roughly 40 square feet of joist cavity. A standard crawl space under a 1,200 square foot home needs maybe $30 of material. $30. That is less than 1 month of the heat loss it is stopping. You enter the crawl space from below, either through a basement access panel or a crawl space hatch cut into the exterior foundation. You bring a staple gun loaded and ready, a roll of chicken wire, a roll of craft paper, a utility knife, and your bales. You break the bales apart by hand, pulling sections free and feeling the density of the pack. The straw comes apart in slabs, compressed and slightly springy, and you can feel the resistance in your palms as you pull each section loose. You press the straw tightly between each pair of joists, compressing it with your forearms and palms until it fills the entire cavity with no air gaps. You push it up into the corners where the joist meets the subfloor. You work it into the narrow ends where the bays terminate at the rim joist. No gaps, none. An air gap is a highway for convective heat loss, and you are closing every road. Once the straw is packed, you cut sections of chicken wire with tin snips and staple them directly to the faces of the joists, holding the straw firmly in place. The wire goes on taut, not sagging, pulled tight across the face of each bay before the staples go in. Then you run craft paper across the bottom of the wire, stapling it every 6 inches to create a breathable but sealed layer that keeps the straw contained and adds a final barrier against air infiltration. The whole system takes 1 afternoon. 2 people working together can do a 1,200 square foot crawl space in about 4 hours. 1 person working alone takes closer to 6. Either way, you come out of that crawl space with grit in your hair, straw down your collar, and a job that will pay for itself inside of a single billing cycle. But the straw was not done yet. Not even close. Within 48 hours of installation, the floor surface temperature above the treated crawl space rises 6 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. 6 to 9 degrees. That is not a rounding error. That is the difference between a floor you avoid walking on barefoot and a floor that feels like part of a warm room. You notice it the first morning. You step out of bed and the floor does not shock you. It does not pull the warmth out of your feet the way it did the week before. The thermostat never moves. The furnace runs the same cycles, but the room feels warmer because the floor is no longer a cold sink pulling heat out of the air and out of your body. And no, I am not making that up. The physics are straightforward. Before the installation, the air in that crawl space was sitting at or near outdoor temperature. Conduction moved that cold directly through the subfloor and into the living space. The straw breaks that conduction pathway completely. Straw has an R value of approximately R 1.5 per inch when packed tightly. A standard floor joist cavity is 9 to 12 inches deep. That gives you R13 to R18 of insulation for $5 in materials. Fiberglass bats of equivalent rating cost $40 to $60 for the same area. Rigid foam costs more. Spray foam costs dramatically more. And none of them can be installed by one person lying on their back in a crawl space with a staple gun and an afternoon free. The Amish have been doing this since before the Civil War. They did not call it thermal bridging mitigation. They did not have a name for it at all. They just knew that a packed floor stayed warm and an empty floor did not. 200 years of empirical data, confirmed by modern building science, available at your local farm supply store for the price of a fast food lunch. If the straw method had stopped here, this would be a very different story, because the floor is only one part of the problem. The crawl space fix addresses conduction through the subfloor. It addresses convective loss through air movement in that cavity. But there is a third mechanism of heat loss operating simultaneously in every room of the house, every hour of every winter night. It is invisible. It is silent. and it accounts for up to 30% of total home heat loss, all by itself. But this was not just about the floor anymore. The windows had been watching the whole time, and they had their own confession to make. The fugitive. The crawl space is finished, the straw is packed, the chicken wire is stapled, the craft paper is down. It looks clean, professional, effective. And for most homes, it will be. But there are conditions under which this exact installation becomes a liability instead of an asset. Conditions that are common. Conditions that are easy to miss. Conditions that have turned a $5 solution into a $1,000 problem for homeowners who skip the inspection step. The timing of what happened next, almost too perfect. The first and most dangerous mistake is moisture. Straw in a dry crawl space is an insulator. Straw in a damp crawl space is a mold farm. The distinction matters enormously. Before any straw goes into any crawl space, you must assess the moisture situation honestly. Get down there with a flashlight and spend 10 minutes looking carefully. Look at the soil, look at the foundation walls, look at the existing wood. If you see white mineral deposits on the concrete, that is efflorescence, and it means water is actively moving through that wall. If you see dark staining on the joists, that is a moisture history that may still be ongoing. If the soil looks wet or smells earthy in a way that is more swamp than forest floor, you have a moisture problem that must be addressed before any organic material goes into that space. Fix the moisture first. Always. Non-negotiable. The second mistake is using hay instead of straw. This sounds like a trivial distinction. It is not. Hay contains seeds. Seeds contain nutrients. Nutrients feed mold and attract rodents. Hay also has a higher moisture content than properly dried straw. Rice straw and wheat straw are the correct materials. They are dry, low in nutrients, and resistant to mold when kept in a dry environment. The bag or bale will say what it is. Read it before you buy it. The price difference between hay and rice straw is negligible. The difference in outcome is not. But the version you have heard, that is not the full picture. The third issue is ventilation. When you pack straw tightly against the subfloor and seal it with craft paper, you create a relatively closed system. In most climates, that is exactly what you want. But at the perimeter of the crawl space, where the foundation wall meets the floor framing, leave a small gap, 2 to 3 inches. This allows any incidental moisture vapor to escape rather than accumulate at the edges where condensation is most likely to form. It is a small detail. It prevents a large problem. The fourth caveat is vapor barriers. In wet climates, specifically the Pacific Northwest, the Gulf Coast, anywhere with sustained high humidity, straw insulation alone is not sufficient. You need a vapor barrier on the ground first. 6 mil polyethylene sheeting, overlapped at the seams by 12 inches, running up the foundation walls, and taped. The straw goes on top of that. Without the vapor barrier, ground moisture migrates upward into the straw regardless of how dry the crawl space looks in January. This is not optional in those climates. It is the difference between a successful installation and a mold remediation bill. Mold remediation in a crawl space runs between $1,500 and $6,000 depending on severity. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. The fifth and final caveat is fire. Straw is combustible. That is a fact. But straw that is fully enclosed in chicken wire and covered with craft paper, in a crawl space with no ignition sources, presents a fire risk that building scientists classify as low. The key phrase is no ignition sources. Keep open flames, space heaters, and any electrical work with exposed wiring away from the crawl space. Do not store flammable materials near the access hatch. Do not run extension cords through the crawl space. These are common sense rules that apply to any insulated crawl space, not just straw. But they bear stating plainly because the word straw triggers an instinctive concern that deserves a direct answer rather than a dismissal. The installation is safe when done correctly. It is problematic when done carelessly. And here is the honest summary. Dry crawl space, rice or wheat straw, chicken wire, craft paper, perimeter gap, vapor barrier in wet climates, no ignition sources. Follow those rules and you have a $5 insulation system that outperforms materials costing 10 times as much. Ignore those rules and you have a different problem entirely. Everything the straw method had built was about to work against them. Because the floor was warmer now. The conduction pathway was broken. But across the room, in every room, the windows were still doing their work. Cold, silent, invisible, pulling heat out of the air at a rate that no floor fix could compensate for on its own. You could feel it standing anywhere near the glass. That faint, persistent chill radiating inward from every pane, every frame, every gap where the glazing compound had dried and cracked and pulled away from the wood years ago. Run your hand slowly along the inside surface of a window frame on a January night, and you will feel the temperature drop degree by degree as your fingers move toward the glass. The wood is cool, the glazing bead is cooler, the glass itself is cold enough to pull the warmth right out of your palm before you even make contact. Single-pane glass loses heat three ways at once. Conduction moves warmth directly through the glass itself, molecule by molecule, from the warm interior surface to the cold exterior surface without stopping. Convection pulls warm room air down along the cold glass face, chilling it, dropping it to the floor, and drawing more warm air in behind it in a loop that runs continuously all night, without any help from the wind outside. And radiation sends infrared energy straight through the glass and out into the dark, silently, invisibly, at a rate that a single-pane window cannot slow or interrupt in any meaningful way. 3 mechanisms, all running simultaneously, all night, for every window in the house. The Amish understood this too, and their answer, like their answer for the floor, cost almost nothing. But that answer, and the reason it works, is what changed permanently because of this story. Watch this next.